There's a $40 piece of burnt cotton fabric that catches fire from a single spark and stays lit in wind, rain, and freezing cold when every modern fire starter you own has already failed. No lighter fluid, no matches, no batteries, no chemical ignition source of any kind. Just a small square of charred cloth that has been proven to ignite reliably after sitting sealed in storage for over a full decade without losing even a fraction of its effectiveness. The United States Army Survival Manual documents this material as a primary fire starting method for extreme field conditions. The British Special Air Service has trained with this technique since the Second World War. Scandinavian military survival schools teach this method as the single most reliable ignition source available when all modern equipment has failed. This is not a campfire trick invented on social media. This exact material has been found inside Viking burial sites dating back to 800 AD. Medieval European soldiers carried it in their belt pouches on every campaign for over 600 years. Indigenous peoples across 4 continents independently developed the identical preparation method thousands of years before European contact ever occurred. Char cloth was the dominant fire-starting technology on planet Earth for longer than any other method in recorded human history. Then, a $2.8 billion lighter and fire starter industry decided something very important. They decided that you should absolutely never learn that a scrap of old cotton in a tin can could replace every single product on their shelves. They did not abandon char cloth because it failed in the field. They did not replace it because science found something superior. They buried it because a $4 fire starter that works for a decade and can be made from garbage cannot be sold back to you in blister packs for $12 every camping season. And anything that cannot generate repeat purchases must be erased from public memory. This is the story of the most reliable fire-starting material human beings have ever created, and the massive industry that needs you to believe it no longer exists. Hit subscribe right now and ring the bell. Every video on this channel exposes a solution that a massive industry desperately needs you to never discover. Do not miss a single one. Travel back with me to approximately 3500 BC, somewhere in the Alpine region between what is now Austria and northern Italy. A man is walking through a high mountain pass. He carries a small leather pouch strapped tightly against his waist. Inside that pouch sits a collection of dried fungus, a piece of iron pyrite, a sharp flint striker, and several small squares of dark, impossibly lightweight fabric that crumbles at the edges when touched. That man is Otzi, the Iceman, the oldest naturally preserved human mummy ever discovered in Europe. Found frozen in a glacier in 1991, perfectly preserved for over 300 years. When archaeologists carefully opened his fire-starting kit, they found something that stunned the scientific community. Otzi carried charred organic material specifically prepared to catch sparks. Not raw tinder, not dry grass, not bark shavings. Deliberately charred material designed to ignite from the low-temperature sparks produced by striking flint against iron pyrite. 5,300 years ago, a man walking through the Alps understood the exact same principle that every survival instructor teaches today. Charred organic material has the lowest ignition temperature of any natural tinder on Earth. A single spark lands on it, and it begins to glow. That glow transfers to a tinder bundle. That bundle bursts into flame. Fire. Guaranteed. Every time. Otzi did not stumble upon this by accident. The preparation of his charred material showed deliberate, skilled processing. This was a refined technology passed down across generations long before Otzi was even born. Now move forward to the Iron Age, roughly 800 AD, the coast of Scandinavia. A Viking longship is being loaded for a raid across the North Sea toward the British coastline. Every warrior aboard carries weapons, armor, dried food, and one small item that commanders consider more important than any sword, a fire kit. Inside each kit sits a steel striker, a piece of sharp flint, and a carefully sealed pouch of charred linen cloth. Char cloth, made by heating strips of woven linen fabric inside a sealed vessel until the material carbonizes completely without turning to ash. These pouches have been recovered from Viking archaeological sites across Scandinavia, Iceland, the British Isles, and as far east as the trade routes of the Byzantine Empire. Char cloth was so essential to Viking expeditions that fire kits have been found buried alongside warriors in their graves, placed next to their swords and shields as equipment deemed necessary for the afterlife. The Vikings understood something that modern campers have been taught to forget. Fire is not a convenience. Fire is survival itself. And the material that guarantees fire under any condition is worth more than any weapon you carry. Now cross into medieval Europe, the 12th through the 18th century, over 600 consecutive years. Every single soldier, traveler, merchant, and explorer in Europe carried a tinderbox. And inside every tinderbox sat the same 3 components: steel striker, flint, and char cloth. This was not optional field equipment. This was as fundamental as carrying water. Historical records from the English Civil War, the Napoleonic campaigns, the Crusades, and the colonization of the Americas all document char cloth as the primary means of creating fire across every European military operation for over half a millennium. The Hudson's Bay Company, the dominant trading enterprise across colonial North America, listed tinderboxes containing char cloth as standard trade goods alongside muskets, blankets, and steel axes. Fur trappers operating alone in the Canadian wilderness for months at a time relied on char cloth as their only guaranteed fire source through brutal sub-zero winters where wet matches would have been completely useless. Now, travel across the Atlantic into pre-colonial North America. Indigenous peoples across the Great Plains, the Pacific Northwest, the Eastern Woodlands, and the Desert Southwest independently developed charring techniques for organic materials that mirror the European char cloth process almost exactly. The Lakota charred the inner pith of dried cattail stalks to create a material that catches sparks identically to charred linen. Apache survival traditions include charring specific plant fibers inside clay vessels sealed with mud. Pacific Northwest tribes charred cedar bark into a material so spark sensitive that a single strike of flint could ignite it in pouring rain. No contact with European technology, no shared knowledge base, completely independent discovery of the identical principle on the opposite side of the planet. Because this is not cultural tradition, this is physics. Carbon-rich material with maximum surface area and minimal density ignites at temperatures far below any other natural substance. Every civilization that needed reliable fire eventually discovered this independently because the chemistry demanded it. For over 5,000 documented years, charred cloth and charred plant material was the most important survival technology on Earth. More important than any weapon, more important than any shelter design, because without fire, nothing else mattered. Then in 1826, an English chemist named John Walker invented the friction match. And everything changed, not because matches were more reliable. They were dramatically less reliable in wet conditions than char cloth, but because matches were disposable, consumable, sellable in boxes of 50 for a small profit that multiplied across millions of customers buying them over and over again forever. Char cloth could be made for free from old rags in any kitchen. A product that is free and permanent cannot support an industry, and so an industry was built around its replacement instead. The modern disruption. By 1850, the match industry had exploded across Europe and America. Companies like Bryant and May in England and Diamond Match Company in America were producing billions of matches per year. Their product had one critical commercial advantage over char cloth. Matches are destroyed upon use. Every match struck is a match that must be purchased again. Char cloth, by contrast, is made once from materials that cost virtually nothing. A single batch lasts months of regular use. It can be made from any scrap cotton fabric, old t-shirts, worn-out jeans, rags destined for the garbage. The raw material is literally free. You cannot build a billion-dollar industry around a fire-starting method that uses garbage as its input and never needs to be repurchased from a store. By 1900, matches had completely replaced tinderboxes in the consumer market. By 1950, disposable lighters entered the market and created a second revenue stream. Today, the global lighter and match market exceeds $2.8 billion in annual revenue. The outdoor fire starter segment alone, including ferrocerium rods, fire starter cubes, waterproof matches, and chemical gel igniters, generates hundreds of millions more. Every single one of these products shares one trait. They are consumed upon use and require repeat purchasing. A tin of char cloth that costs $4 in materials and works reliably for a decade represents the complete destruction of that business model. You cannot patent the process of heating cotton in a sealed container. The technique is over 5,000 years old. You cannot trademark charred fabric. You cannot build a subscription around a product that the customer makes from garbage in their own kitchen. And what cannot generate recurring revenue must be forgotten. Now stay with me, because the science behind char cloth is where this story becomes absolutely undeniable. When you heat cotton fabric inside an airtight container to approximately 400 degrees Celsius, a chemical process called pyrolysis occurs. The heat breaks down the complex cellulose molecules that make up the cotton fiber. Volatile compounds, the gases and liquids within the plant fiber, are driven off through tiny vent holes in the container. What remains behind is nearly pure carbon, a skeletal framework of the original fabric structure composed almost entirely of carbon atoms arranged in a highly porous matrix. This is the same fundamental chemistry that produces charcoal from wood, but char cloth has a critical advantage over charcoal that makes it dramatically superior as an ignition material. The original woven structure of the fabric is preserved at the microscopic level, every thread, every fiber, every tiny gap between the woven strands. This creates an enormous surface area relative to the material's mass, and surface area is everything in ignition science. A spark is a tiny particle of material heated to extreme temperatures, typically between 1,500 and 3,000 degrees Celsius, but lasting only a fraction of a second and carrying very little total thermal energy. For a spark to ignite a material, that material must be able to catch fire from an extremely brief, extremely localized burst of heat. Char cloth accomplishes this because its massive surface, area to mass ratio, allows a microscopic point of carbon to reach ignition temperature from a single spark before the heat dissipates. The carbon at the point of contact begins to oxidize. That oxidation generates its own heat, which ignites the adjacent carbon, which generates more heat, creating a self-sustaining chain reaction that spreads across the cloth as a glowing ember. The ignition temperature of char cloth has been measured in laboratory conditions at approximately 200 to 300 degrees Celsius. Compare that to dry wood, which requires 300 to 400 degrees, or paper, which requires 230 to 250 degrees but lacks the structural integrity to maintain an ember in wind. Char cloth ignites at a lower temperature than almost any other prepared tinder material and maintains a stable, wind-resistant ember that can last 5 to 15 minutes depending on the size of the piece. That ember is hot enough to ignite any tinder bundle from dry grass to birch bark to cattail fluff, even in conditions where matches would immediately blow out and lighter fluid would evaporate. Now here's the finding that terrifies the fire starter industry. Researchers and survival instructors have tested char cloth stored in sealed containers for extreme durations. The carbon structure of properly prepared char cloth does not degrade over time in the absence of moisture and oxygen. The material is already fully pyrolyzed. There is nothing left to decompose. No organic compounds remain to break down. No chemical reaction is occurring during storage. Sealed char cloth recovered after 10 years in storage has been tested and ignites identically to freshly made material. The spark catches. The ember spreads. The fire starts. A decade of sitting in a tin, and it performs as though it was made that morning. Compare that to matches, which degrade from humidity exposure within months, if not sealed perfectly. Compare it to ferrocerium rods, which oxidize on the surface over years of storage and require scraping to expose fresh material. Compare it to lighter fluid, which evaporates through even the best sealed containers within a year or two. Compare it to butane lighters, which leak propellant over time, fail mechanically, crack in extreme cold, and become completely useless above approximately 10,000 feet altitude, where reduced oxygen pressure prevents reliable ignition. Char cloth has 0 mechanical components, 0 chemical propellants, 0 pressure-dependent ignition systems, 0 expiration dates. It is the only fire-starting material in existence that has no theoretical shelf life whatsoever when stored properly. Now let me explain why this matters beyond camping convenience. In genuine survival scenarios, the difference between fire and no fire is literally the difference between life and death. Hypothermia kills faster than dehydration, faster than starvation. A person exposed to cold, wet conditions without fire can die in as little as 3 hours. The United States Army Survival Manual, Field Manual 21-76, explicitly teaches the preparation and use of char cloth as a survival fire starting method. The manual describes charring cotton material in a metal container as a standard field technique for creating reliable tinder in austere environments. The British Special Air Service, widely considered the most elite special operations unit in the world, includes char cloth preparation in their survival training curriculum. SAS selection candidates are taught to create fire-starting materials from found objects because, in real-world operations, lighters fail, matches run out, and ferrocerium rods get lost. The one thing you can always make from available materials is char cloth. Scandinavian military survival schools in Sweden, Norway, and Finland all teach char cloth preparation as a core skill. In environments where temperatures drop to minus 30 degrees Celsius and sustained wet conditions last for weeks, char cloth remains the single most reliable primary ignition source available. The Israeli Defense Forces train wilderness survival units in char cloth preparation for desert and arid environment operations where extreme temperature swings between day and night make conventional fire-starting methods inconsistent. Military forces across the world train their soldiers to make and use char cloth. And yet, it is not standard issue in a single military survival kit sold to any armed force on Earth. So, if char cloth is documented in military survival manuals, taught by the most elite special operations forces, tested and proven for over 5,000 years, has no expiration date, and costs virtually nothing to produce, why is it not standard issue military equipment? Why does every military survival kit contain matches, a ferrocerium rod, chemical fire starters, and windproof lighter components instead of the one material proven to outlast all of them? The answer is the same answer it always is: follow the money. Military procurement contracts are among the most lucrative business arrangements in the defense industry. Every item included in a standard issue kit generates revenue for the manufacturer who wins that contract. And every consumable item generates repeat revenue because consumables must be resupplied. Matches are consumed on use. They must be reordered constantly. Ferrocerium rods wear down with use. They must be replaced on a scheduled cycle. They require ongoing production contracts. Windproof lighter components need fuel refills and mechanical replacement parts. Each of these products generates a continuous procurement revenue stream worth millions of dollars across military contracts that span years or decades. Char cloth generates effectively zero procurement revenue after initial supply. A soldier who learns to make char cloth from any available cotton material never needs a resupply shipment. A battalion that makes its own fire-starting material from uniform scraps and empty ammunition tins never places another fire starter purchase order. A product that eliminates its own supply chain cannot survive in a procurement system designed to reward ongoing supply. Defense procurement committees are advised by industry representatives. Equipment standards are influenced by manufacturers who bid on contracts. Testing protocols are designed around the performance characteristics of commercial products, not improvised field materials. Char cloth is not excluded from military survival kits because it fails any performance test. It is excluded because it passes every test too well while generating zero revenue for the companies that supply those kits. Now look at the civilian outdoor industry. Walk into any camping or outdoor gear store today. You will find an entire wall dedicated to fire-starting products, waterproof matches in sealed tubes for $8 to $15, ferrocerium rods with branded handles for $10 to $25, chemical fire starter cubes in branded packaging for $6 to $12 per box, magnesium fire starter blocks for $8 to $20, windproof plasma lighters for $15 to $40. Every one of these products is designed to be consumed, depleted, or replaced. Everyone generates repeat purchases. Everyone carries significant retail markup on materials that cost pennies to manufacture. You will not find a single tin of char cloth on those shelves. Not one. In an entire store dedicated to outdoor survival, the most proven fire-starting material in human history is completely absent. Not because it does not work, because it works too well and costs too little to sell. You cannot charge $15 for something the customer can make from an old sock and an empty mint tin on their kitchen stove. And what you cannot sell at margin, you do not stock on shelves. What you do not stock, customers never see. And what customers never see, they eventually forget ever existed. That is not conspiracy theory. That is basic retail economics applied to a $2.8 billion industry that depends entirely on repeat consumption of disposable fire-starting products. Now, I need to be completely honest with you here. Char cloth is not a perfect standalone fire-starting system for every situation. It catches a spark beautifully, but it produces an ember, not an open flame. You still need a tinder bundle to convert that ember into fire. If you cannot prepare or find dry tinder material, the ember alone will not save you. Char cloth is also vulnerable to moisture if stored improperly. Unsealed char cloth exposed to humidity will absorb water and become unreliable. Proper storage in an airtight container is essential. And making char cloth does require heat. You need an existing fire or heat source to create your first batch. It is not a zero-input solution. It is a force multiplier. Once you have fire, char cloth guarantees you can always get fire again. But here's what char cloth does better than any product on any shelf in any store on Earth. It catches a spark at lower temperatures than any commercial tinder. It burns as a stable ember for minutes, not seconds. It works in wind that would extinguish any match or lighter. It weighs almost nothing. It stores indefinitely in a sealed container. It can be made from any cotton fabric that would otherwise be thrown away, and it costs effectively nothing. No other fire-starting method in existence offers this combination of reliability, longevity, and zero cost. Nothing comes close. Here is exactly what to do with this knowledge starting today. What you need. One small metal tin with a tight-fitting lid. An old breath mint tin, a small paint tin, or any metal container that closes securely. Cost from a hardware store, approximately $1 to $3. You probably already have one in your kitchen drawer. One piece of 100% cotton fabric, an old t-shirt, a bandana, a piece of denim from worn-out jeans, any natural cotton material. Do not use synthetic fabrics. Polyester and nylon will melt instead of charring. The fabric must be cotton, linen, or another plant-based natural fiber. Cost for fabric if you are using an old shirt headed for the garbage, 0. Step 1. Prepare the fabric. Cut the cotton into squares approximately 5 centimeters by 5 centimeters, roughly 2 inches by 2 inches. You want pieces small enough to fit flat inside your tin in a single layer or stacked neatly. Pack the tin with the cotton squares. Fill it completely, but do not compress them too tightly. The material needs to be snug, but not crushed. Step 2. Punch the vent hole. Using a nail or a small drill bit, punch one single small hole through the lid of the tin. This hole is critical. During the charring process, volatile gases must escape, or pressure will build inside the tin and blow the lid off. The hole lets gas out while preventing oxygen from flooding in and turning your cloth to ash. One small hole, not 2, not 3, 1. Step 3. Cook the tin. Place the sealed tin on a heat source. A campfire works, a gas stove works. Even a candle flame will work, it just takes longer. A barbecue grill set to medium heat is ideal. Within minutes, you will see thin white or yellow smoke begin to stream out of the vent hole. This smoke is the volatile compounds being driven out of the cotton. The smoke may ignite briefly as a small flame dancing above the vent hole. This is normal and expected. Let the tin sit on the heat for approximately 10 to 20 minutes, depending on your heat source and the amount of fabric inside. The process is complete when the smoke stops completely. When no more gas is escaping, all volatile compounds have been driven off and only carbon remains. Step 4. Cool and seal. Remove the tin from heat. Immediately seal the vent hole with a small piece of tape, a dab of wax, or simply place the tin upside down on a flat surface to prevent air from entering while cooling. Do not open the tin until it is completely cool to the touch. If you open it while hot, oxygen will rush in and the superheated carbon will ignite, burning your entire batch to useless white ash in seconds. Wait. Be patient. Let it cool fully. Step 5. Inspect your char cloth. Open the tin. Inside, you will find squares of fabric that are now completely black, incredibly lightweight, and slightly fragile to the touch. The material should be uniformly black throughout. No brown spots, no uncharred areas. If some pieces are still brown or partially uncharred, reseal the tin and cook for another 5 to 10 minutes. Good char cloth should be deep black, bend without snapping, and catch a spark instantly when struck with a ferrocerium rod or flint and steel. Step 6. Test it. Take a single piece of char cloth and strike a spark onto it from any spark source. A ferrocerium rod, a flint and steel set, even the sparks from scraping a knife blade across a hard rock. The spark will land on the char cloth and immediately begin to glow. A bright orange ember will spread slowly outward from the point of contact. That ember will sustain itself for minutes. Place it inside a tinder bundle of dry grass, bark shavings, or cotton balls. Blow gently. Fire. Every time. In wind, in cold, in conditions that would kill a match before it left your fingers. Step 7. Store for the long term. Seal your remaining char cloth inside the tin. Wrap the tin with tape or wax if you want maximum moisture protection. Place it in your survival kit, your backpack, your car emergency kit, your home preparedness supplies. It will be there waiting. 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, ready to catch a spark and give you fire the moment you need it. Total cost for the entire process. 1 tin, 1 old shirt, 10 minutes on a stove, under $4 if you buy everything new, $0 if you use materials you already have. Compare that to a lifetime of buying matches, lighters, and branded fire starters every camping season. $4 once versus hundreds of dollars over a lifetime of outdoor activity. For a product that works better, lasts longer, and never expires. Let me state these numbers one final time so they permanently settle into your memory. A batch of char cloth made from 1 old t-shirt and a $2 mint tin costs effectively nothing and provides dozens of guaranteed fire starts. A box of waterproof matches costs $10 and gives you 25 strikes that fail in wind and degrade in humidity. A branded ferrocerium rod costs $15 to $25 and wears down to nothing after a few hundred strikes. A windproof lighter costs $20 to $40 and fails mechanically, leaks fuel, and becomes useless above 10,000 feet. Char cloth catches a spark at 200 degrees Celsius, burns as a stable ember for up to 15 minutes, works in wind, rain, cold, and altitude, stores indefinitely in a sealed tin, and can be remade endlessly from any cotton fabric you find. Otzi carried it 5,300 years ago across a frozen alpine pass. Vikings trusted it on raids across the North Sea. Every army in Europe relied on it for 600 years of continuous warfare. Special forces units still train with it today. In a $2.8 billion fire starter industry needs you to believe it does not exist. This knowledge never disappeared from the planet. It was buried under blister packs and branded packaging. Buried under a retail strategy designed to make you buy the same disposable product over and over again for your entire life. Buried under an outdoor industry that understood that the best fire-starting material ever discovered cannot generate a single dollar of repeat revenue. Otzi knew 1,300 years ago. He carried charred tinder in a leather pouch across the highest mountains in Europe. The Vikings knew. They buried char cloth alongside warriors as essential equipment for the next world. Every army in medieval Europe knew for 600 unbroken years. Not one soldier marched without it. The Lakota knew. The Apache knew. Pacific Northwest tribes knew. Every indigenous civilization that mastered fire independently arrived at the same answer. The British SAS knows right now they teach their most elite operators to make char cloth from scraps, because when everything else fails, carbon and a spark never do. And a $2.8 billion industry spent decades making absolutely certain that you would walk past a $2 tin and a pile of old rags without ever realizing you were looking at the most reliable fire technology human beings have ever created. But right here, right now, watching this video, you just learned what 5,000 years of human survival already proved. Fire is not a product you buy, Fire is a skill you own, and the material that guarantees it costs less than a cup of coffee and lasts longer than the camping gear companies want you to know. Your great-great-grandparents knew this. Their grandparents knew it before them. Every generation for 5,000 years knew it. Then 2 generations of advertising made you forget. But today, sitting right here, you just remembered. If this video opens something for you, subscribe and share it with every person who has ever struggled to start a fire in the field. Every single share preserves what the outdoor industry spent decades trying to erase from your knowledge. The next video drops soon. What is inside weighs even heavier.